All right, so here we're saying if failure to rotate crops depletes the soil nutrients gradually, unless other preventative measures are taken. So whenever we have that unless, that means that we can switch it, right? So this is saying that if the soil's nutrients, if we don't have soil nutrients, what does that mean? Actually, I should do that first. If we have soil's nutrients, what does that mean, Jenny? Actually, I started this completely wrong. Okay, so failure to rotate crops depletes the soil nutrients gradually unless other preventative measures are taken. So if we don't rotate our crops,
then other preventative measures were taken.
yes, that means that failure to rotate crops depletes the soils unless, so if we don't rotate crops, we're not gonna have soil nutrients. So if we have soil nutrients, that means that we rotated the crops, right? Unless we did a preventative measure. Mm-hmm. So then we get to this if sentence. So if the soil's nutrients are completely depleted, so right here, we're looking at this part, additional crops cannot be grown unless fertilizer is applied. So if crops are grown, what does that mean happen? Janati?
If the crops are grown within soil that's completely depleted, that means fertilizer was added. Right. Okay.
All other things being equal, if vegetables are grown in soil that had fertilizer applied rather than being grown in non-fertilizer soil, they are more vulnerable to pests, and as a consequence, must be treated with larger amounts of pesticides. So here, I literally just wrote on my notes, okay, so if vegetables are grown with fertilizer, that just means more pesticides. The more pesticides used on vegetables, the greater the health risk to humans from eating. So, and if that happens, the greater the health risk. I do not actually typically diagram on my exam. There might be one question I do because I think it's really easy to mess this up, but I like to do it in review just to practice. So it looks like our answer choices were between A and C. So our question is, suppose there were at least one vegetable that were grown in soil in which fertilizer had never been applied. So we don't have fertilizer. On the basis of the passage, which of the following would be true regarding those vegetables? So what do we know, before even reading our answer choices, what do we know about if fertilizer doesn't happen?
Other preventative measures could have been taken.
Yeah, other preventative measures could have been taken.
They are vulnerable to pests.
If there was no fertilizer, would that mean that I have to go back to what my things actually, my symbols mean? Crops.
Based on the diagram, that would be the no crops, and then go back. That would be
soil nutrients.
There were soil nutrients, and then that would be rotation of crops.
Excellent. But here, just like is there could be, instead of not having crops, instead of having the soil nutrients, there could have been other preventative measures, right? So let's look at A here. We have the soil in which the vegetables were grown may have been completely depleted of nutrients because of an earlier failure to rotate crops. What do we think of this answer choice?
I didn't think that one was right because it said that fertilizer had never been applied. Yeah. So it had to have the nutrients.
We don't have those preventative measures, right?
Right.
Excellent. We don't have the preventative measures because it says unless fertilizer is applied. If we don't have fertilizer, then we don't have the preventative measure. The fertilizer is the preventative measure in the stimulus. So it's not A. And then let's look at C. The vegetables were grown in soil that had not been completely depleted of nutrients, but not necessarily soil in which the crops have been rotated. Why is this the correct answer? Janati?
I chose that one because whenever I was like kind of putting it out, I was like, okay, well, it could have had preventative measures as the other option rather than just being rotated. And I was like, hey, well, this is also not a strong answer choice. It's like mild, so I chose that one over A.
Yes, because it says that they had not, because there could have been preventative measures that allowed it to not be completely depleted of nutrients, but not necessarily. So it didn't have to be in crops that were rotated, which is true.
Sorry, I'm confused because in the question it says they were grown in soil in which fertilizer had never been applied. So I assume that meant fertilizer wasn't being applied. Like we had to take that into consideration. So that's why I didn't pick C. But I get it now, but that really like
confuses you. I feel like I just said preventative measures were on fertilizer.
Yeah, and I
think I misspoke, to be honest. Now that I'm looking at this, failure to rotate crops depletes soil's nutrients. So we deplete the nutrients unless other preventative measures are taken.
So I thought about it like, so if you have fertilizer, then you have no nutrients. And so like, I thought C was right because it says it's not completely depleted of nutrients. So then there's no fertilizer, which is what the question, or like the question said. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
That's kind of what I thought about in my head. I was like weighing them in my head. Like
it's a perfect example of like, I get like, it's easy. I think it's easier to do these questions without diagramming, because the second I start diagramming and I try to explain them with diagrams, I start getting confused.
Yeah, I don't do diagrams. I never get to write a diagram ever.
Okay, so if we have soil nutrients without rotating, so if we had soil nutrients and we didn't rotate, that would mean that preventative measures were taken. So that would be the diagram. I just never diagrammed that part. Do you see that, Kamani? Okay, cool.
Yes.